Hi, my name is Lily, and today I'm going to be doing a video on the difference between chemistry and compatibility within relationships and how I think people getting that confused can really lead to a lot of problems down the road. I think people will start getting attached to people that they are actually not compatible with. Chemistry and compatibility aren't the same thing, and just because you have chemistry with someone doesn't mean that you have any long-term compatibility at all, and doesn't mean that it would work in a relationship. There might be a lot of physical attraction or attraction on some level, but either intellectual or emotional, but when it's not enough, people are going to run into issues that become more apparent as time goes on. An example of this, which isn't exclusive to heterosexual relationships, but for the example, we will use that. When a woman wants a guy to be more romantic in a relationship when he's not already romantic. And she might tell him tons of times exactly what she wants, and he just doesn't seem to care, or he might do what she wants for the sake of making her happy, but it's not authentically what he actually wants to do in the relationship. It shouldn't feel like a chore when you're in a relationship to do things to make your partner happy. I think that might be a sign that you actually don't like them. And then even if the guy does change and add new behavior, sometimes there's this feeling of, why did I have to harass him to do something that makes me happy? This pattern is something that's typically starts in childhood, and we end up then projecting all of our childhood issues onto our present day relationships. And so we think if we keep trying long enough that we'll eventually get to change people and act how we want them to. And that doesn't normally work out because it's not genuine. And so the woman here wants a guy who's naturally romantic and considerate of these things that she wants, but ultimately the guy does not naturally feel this way. She is trying to change him into what she wants. When there are men out there who are naturally romantic and like doing these things without already asking. And so if you stay with someone like that, that's not actually aligned with what you truly desire, then you're going to be settling in that aspect of the relationship. Other parts of the connection might be good, but that lack could end up being a bigger problem down the road, especially if romance is important to you in this situation. If a partner is not satisfying some aspect of your relationship despite discussing it and explaining what you desire, then that might show the lack of compatibility in a partnership, and it'd be best to let that person go instead of trying to change them into what you want them to be. The other side is that sometimes guys in that specific case, they just don't know about romantic things, and they can genuinely just not know, if they don't have experience in that realm of things. And so if you request them to buy you flowers or plan dates or something, if he cares about you, he'll put in the effort to do so, and the behavior should change relatively quickly because he cares about you. You shouldn't have to harass him to do things you want him to do. And if he's complaining about doing those things, it's also kind of a red flag, in my opinion. And I think what ends up happening is that people don't want to let go of relationships that are already comfortable and established, if that means being alone or facing the pain of breaking up. And sometimes people are together for a while and it's great, but then it just fizzles out and it's not the same. And once again, people are having a hard time letting go of that, even if there's conflict or abuse, which can also indicate that there's a lack of alignment going on. And these types of relationships are called karmic, and they are for both people to work out certain lessons that are fated. And you can see this in the birth chart sometimes in astrology. And sometimes the relationship can be good at first. If it wasn't, then you probably wouldn't stick around as long enough to learn all the lessons you need to. Or you can be blind to the red flags in the beginning that you don't see. And then maybe you're hanging on to how good it used to be or how good it can be sometimes. And I've seen this play out with countless people. It's always happening to like everybody around me. Like, there are healthy relationships and there are really toxic relationships, and then there's the kinds where it's like, well, it's not really that toxic or abusive maybe yet, but it's just not aligning. It's just, you're just not getting along. You don't really like each other. And that's kind of what's going on there. But definitely it happens where people don't see how unhealthy their connection is, or even if they do, they don't seem to care. And these types of toxic connections can become addictive, and that's why it's so hard to like let them go. It can be like high highs and low lows, and people with very unhealthy family dynamics that they grew up with, they might think that this is just normal or part of how relationships are. But true compatible relationships are supposed to elevate you both. It's not supposed to be toxic. It's not supposed to be unhealthy. But that does require both people involved to be able to self-reflect and be aware of certain triggers that are coming up and being able to deal with them and not suppress these shadow aspects and reflect on them and heal and look into that. Most times our darkest shadows are revealed while interacting with other people or within a partnership. You think, you might be single and think, oh, I don't got any problems, or like, I'm pretty healed. I've dealt with a lot of my trauma or past relationship issues, and then you start to talk to someone you like, or you start dating someone, you're like, oh, wow, actually, I don't know, because you don't realize because it's not being triggered. And that's what happens a lot, and that's like a really common thing that's going on with relationships, especially like this. And it doesn't happen with everybody. Some people really live life with more harmonious relationships of all kinds, and some people it's like pretty chaotic, and there's a lot of tough lessons everywhere with that. And it just depends. You can also see those types of things in the birth chart in astrology. And it just depends on what types of challenges you wanted to do when you're here. And so not everyone's going to have this chaotic nonsense going on. It requires emotional maturity to be able to be honest about these kinds of things that you're dealing with and how to communicate and work through them. And a lot of people don't know how to do this, or they just choose not to. It really can be very tough for some people to understand what they're feeling, let alone put it in words, and then let alone share it with another person. That can be very tough and confusing, especially if you grew up with parents that were very emotionally immature. They were not a great guide to you, and so you're having to like deprogram yourself from that and then try to learn how to navigate the world in a way that's healthier. And I think that's easier to access now with the internet and all these other sources and books and stuff, compared to, say, the older generations who were just kind of winging it, trying their best. And now I feel like there's a lot more sources out there for people to recognize these shadow aspects in themselves that need healing. Because most people are playing out their childhood traumas within their relationships. And an example of this is someone who keeps pouring energy, love, attention in a connection in hopes that this person will one day see their worth and give them the love they desire back if they're already not reciprocating it. This can be like in like a platonic relationship where one person wants to pursue a romantic connection and they're hoping like if I put in all this effort, they're gonna see my worth one day and they're gonna want to love me back. And I mean, I guess sometimes that works, but like, I don't know. It's kind of like, if from the beginning, it's like if you have to persuade them, it's like this role that you're having to play to get someone to like you. They don't already genuinely like you like that. This can also happen already in romantic relationships where you're dating or whatever, and you are the type of person who is doing a lot of things. You're doing the chores, you're very helpful, you're cooking, you're cleaning, you're thoughtful, all this. But then, let's say you break your leg and now you can't do everything that you used to do. You can't do anything. And the roles are honestly reversed, and now maybe that person has to take care of you. And that can show, things like that really can break a relationship, because it really puts it to the test of like, oh, this person was doing all these things for me and now they're not. And now it starts to show like, oh, do I actually like them? And I mean, it's kind of sad, but that's what happens is when you are forming connections based off of what you're doing for other people or what they're doing for you. So if the love isn't returned, it can sometimes feel like a betrayal, which is, it goes back to those childhood issues, right? Where like a lot of kids in the past, they had to act a certain way with their parents in order to receive love, or attention or affection. And that means the love was not freely given in the house. It wasn't unconditional. It was conditional or inconsistent. And so they had to try very hard to be seen or get attention. And those same patterns still exist within you. And now you're pushing it into your relationships. And like I said, it doesn't really work. And that will be in examples if someone gets sick or someone loses their job. Like when shit gets real is when things will fall apart, because part of their attraction and desire to be with you is for all the stuff you do for them. And I mean, like, as long as, like that can be a thing, because I know there's all those love languages of like acts of service and stuff, but that's not like, if that's all you like people for, like what they're doing for you, I think you can see what I'm saying. Okay. So my controversial opinion is, if the love is soul deep, then the honeymoon phase never ends in a relationship. They say, oh, you're dating for a while, everything's great. Oh, and then after that, like things will get stale or whatever. Well, I think when it's soul deep, that's not going to happen. You're just as in love as you are day one, as you are like 10 years later, when it all started. And you do meet couples like that sometimes, where they really are always been in love, and that is a true like soul deep connection. And I think that really highlights how some people in relationships really are genuinely connected on that level, and then some are just together for like physical reasons. Some people are in relationships in which the love is based off of superficial things and not mutual love for one another's soul. It's based on looks, attachment, proximity, or obligation, to name a few. Children. If you're not attracted to someone on a soul level, then you're less likely to stick around if their physical appearance changes due to illness, pregnancy, or weight gain. And I see so many sad videos on the internet of people like that they get older and they're like, I don't like my wife anymore. She's not hot since she got pregnant and had my kids. So I feel like that superficiality, no offense men, I feel like that applies to men more. If appearance is mainly why you're with someone, as you change and age, your feelings may change for them as well, because it was never about who they are inside as a person. So true love, if you've heard of true love, which I feel like some people don't believe in. I do, of course, you know, hopeless romantic here. It's based off of a soul type of connection, obviously. Most people don't experience this type of connection due to blockages in their heart space, heart chakra. You also need to reach a certain level of emotional depth to be able to have enough openness within your heart to experience something like that. And some people do experience it to a degree, but if it ends up in heartbreak or betrayal, then they close off, making it difficult to open back up unless they consciously work through these issues. This closing off of the heart space can actually begin in childhood if the parents are abusive or they don't know how to foster the child's individual development. And it does not reopen unless the trauma is addressed and the light is brought into the shadows. It kind of reminds me of that meme or stereotype of the guy who is still in love with his first love, who broke his heart, and then every girl he dates after, it just won't compare. And like, that person needs to heal and address those problems, and that's what's happening there. Is it's closing off that heart space. And that's why I mentioned earlier, I feel like men deal with this more in relationships, because a lot more men or masculine people are disconnected from their heart space, and that's a lot to do with like societal conditioning, and that men are supposed to be tough and like avoid their feelings and not be in touch with that heart space. And so they're more likely going to choose a partner based off of physical characteristics or not the soul deep, because their heart chakra is not very activated. Not everybody, but it's a lot of them. Sometimes meeting another person can activate and crack open that heart space that has been closed off for so long. But if the trauma inside has not dealt with, and this can create a dynamic where the person becomes avoidant, as it becomes very triggering, and they've learned to associate love and trauma with pain. And so you might, like, it's actually happened to me so much, where you meet people, you like each other, you vibe, and then they ghost you, because it's too painful, because they're like, I see that a lot where guys, like, I don't know if they think they're fine. That's a lot of it, is like guys will go through a breakup and they think they're fine, or they're just not realizing they have things to process. They're suppressing it, and then you meet someone you like, and it triggers you again, and you're like, oh my god, like, just kidding. But instead of knowing what that is, you know, you're feeling insecure inside, instead of like maybe consciously putting that together, that's people become avoidant and they'll ghost you because they don't understand. They don't want to face the trauma. For some reason, they've associated you now with this pain, with traumatizing them, even if it's their own insecurities. And they just don't want to deal with it. They don't know how to explain it. They don't know what they're feeling, but they just know that this feels bad, this feels scary, and they might not even really recognize what's going on. Like, I think they'll honestly invent reasons and be like, oh no, they're like, I don't know, like, they'll just make up some reason for why it can't work, some superficial reason, when really you're triggered because the heart space, and that's avoidant people, and they don't want to deal with that pain. And I mean, I get it, but you know, I think in that case, when it like suddenly comes up out of nowhere, I think that's definitely very like, oh my god, like what the hell is that? Like, it's definitely something you want to deal with on your own like power, your own like conscious will, because when it springs up on you, yeah, you're gonna want to run and hide. I mean, that's the avoidant type of person. Not everyone's like that. Some people are secure in their feelings and they can be like, oh, what am I feeling? Let's sit with this. Let's think about it. But yes, avoidant people. I feel like a lot of more men are more avoidant. Like I said, because of societal conditioning. Don't deal with your feelings. Just suppress it. Bury yourself in substances. Yay. Yeah, anyway. So, this person who's avoidant, they can become avoidant, or when triggered, this can cause them to become like if someone grew up in a toxic environment or has patterns of toxic relationships, then being triggered like this can trigger them to then mimic those types of relationships that they grew up with. So they can start acting abusive or manipulative like their parents were, as that's the blueprint for what they experienced in the dynamics of relationships. And so that's how they think it's supposed to go. And unless you recognize this toxic behavior, the pattern will continue and the relationship will remain toxic until it's too much for either person and you'll have to break up. And if that happens, then the first person, if the first person has abandonment issues, which most people do, abandonment issues, trust issues, who have been hurt, that's why they have intimacy issues in general, and they're emotionally immature, which again a lot of these people are, it'll trigger and perpetuate this negative mindset that, oh, everyone's always gonna leave me, and it's this victimization going on, and they're not gonna take accountability for their actions in the demise of this connection. And it's important to recognize these types of people when dating, because you can get stuck in these cycles. And it is really tough in toxic relationships because they don't always start off toxic. It becomes toxic and you get attached and you like them, and then they start acting wackadoo and you're like, oh, what the hell? Yeah, so it's important to recognize these early signs of this type of behavior because it's just going to get worse. And this is the ignoring the red flags thing we talked about earlier, that this type of toxic behavior comes up a lot in karmic relationships because you miss the red flags. And like in the big picture, some types of karmic relationships, most of them I'd say, you can't really avoid these lessons. Like you can once you learn, because some people have certain patterns that they keep repeating in relationships. They date the same people in different bodies and are like stuck in the same cycles. Okay, that's one thing. But if you date one person, it's toxic, you're like, I'm not doing that again, and learn what happened there and learn from it, then that was the lesson you were supposed to learn. But most people, that first time they have to learn the lesson, there's not really a way to avoid it. And that's the karmic dynamic, is you are kind of blind in a way. It's like all these toxic cycles and patterns in this person, and you're like, la la la, they're great. Delulu. You just overlook it. And that's, related to self-worth, self-esteem, people pleaser, bad with boundaries kind of energy. And so those are the types of people that get sucked into this toxic behavior, because it's normally someone who's more like empathetic and someone narcissistic, and they get paired up a lot, and that's generally a toxic relationship. And the narcissistic person will generally keep taking until the empathetic person is like, I gotta stop, this is killing me. So fun stuff. So if you end up staying with someone who is toxic and abusive, it's enabling the behavior. Like, especially if they say they're gonna change, they do something and you're like, that's it, I'm done. They're like, no, change, please, please. They don't. They don't. Basically, your self-worth continues to dwindle when you're in this type of relationship, because it's normally, there's disrespect going on, there's belittling, there's abuse, and until you realize you deserve better, you're gonna feel compelled to stay in that connection. So soul connection love is based off of their soul and vibrates at an unconditionally loving frequency. This is accepting someone regardless of their faults and supporting them through it. And I have seen people complain before that these types of people don't exist anymore and everyone's so shallow. And I will say it's not very common, but people like this still do exist. In order to find them, it's important to work on loving yourself unconditionally to attract that same energy to you. You focus on yourself, your goals, and figuring out your life purpose while remaining open to other types of connections is important for attracting these types of people. Because some people, they might be self-focused, working on themselves, doing all this, but they're not open. It's almost like you're closing off and kind of avoiding that. And there's still that hurdle of remaining open and knowing that you can get hurt dealing with people, relationships, but you get better at dealing with it, and you learn that if you get mistreated in these situations, it's not about you. It's about them. If they mistreat you, if they ghost you, it's something about them. You learn to take things less personally. And that's how you get more secure in dating, and things don't destroy you as much if you're emotional like me. So remaining open is important. And making sure that you are connecting with what you truly desire in your heart space and clear emotional blockages. And think, do you want a partner because you're truly ready for a deep, intimate connection with equal give and take, or are you just afraid of being alone? Afraid of being alone would be living in fear, not through your heart space. Ultimately, though, I feel for romantic relationships, I think there is an element of divine timing and fate at work for various reasons. You can be aligned in that energy for a while of meeting someone, but still haven't been able to attract the right person to you. And other people have free will, and perhaps that you're destined to meet someone to be with them, but they're not in the right alignment yet with you. Or perhaps you need to move somewhere else. You need to get a job somewhere else. You need to do something new. Travel somewhere. It's important to listen to the inner guidance, even if you don't know where exactly it might be leading you. It's important to trust the process with that. And normally you'll be able to look back and understand why things happened the way they did, or in the timing that was necessary, and why you had to go through certain maybe heartbreaking experiences to meet the right person, or why it took so long. And you see that too when you finally meet someone that you're aligned with. You see, well, if I didn't go through these shitty experiences, I would not be who I am and mindful of who I need to be in a successful relationship. You know, those things really do shape you. Yeah, maybe you want a partner now, but you still have some lessons to go through first that will bring you more alignment and have a more happier and fulfilling connection with who you're meant to be with. Or maybe the universe wants you to have a better job first, or are in a better place mentally before getting into a new connection. There is a lot of different factors when it comes to being connected with someone in a like happy, secure type of relationship, and not toxic. So a lot of people end up marrying karmic partners, which can cause issues down the road. That's not to say this should be avoided. Most times if you get married, it is fated and something you can see in the birth chart, and especially with synastry charts between two people. There are lessons to be learned, and sometimes no matter how aware you are or self-reflect, you can't avoid certain karmic experiences with people. Even if you have the feeling something isn't quite right, I've done that a million times. Even if you have the feeling something isn't quite right, you'll do it anyway. You'll be like, oh, whatever, let's just go. And that's why karmic relationships can be pretty intense or like intoxicating. It's to draw you in, it's magnetic, because it's a crucial part of your life path to learn and meant to teach you. It can cause you to think irrationally, behave differently towards people because you're so mesmerized and certain of these intense feelings. It's almost like a spell, but it's a karmic contract. And that's how these types of connections work. When there is unequal give and take in a relationship, this can also indicate a lack of compatibility or interest. But it can also be that the people need to gain more balance within themselves. Someone who is overextending and putting in most of the work in a connection needs to learn how to pull back if the same energy is not being reciprocated. This is especially true if the connection is in the beginning stages of development or when you're getting to know each other. I think give and take in a relationship can vary day to day or weeks at a time. If one person is going through something and needs support, needs more support from the other. But if this has become a long-term unbalanced connection, it can lead to instability or resentments if the other person is not being appreciative of this. The other person needs to be able to put in more effort in the connection, but if they're unable to, for other reasons such as like work or illness, caring for children, mental health issues, then they at least need to be kind and appreciative and acknowledge the other person that is carrying more of the weight in the relationship. This will probably not be able to last long term, but it can for extended periods of time if necessary. Definitely depends. I have heard before that when you get married, it combines your karma with the other person's, and sometimes it's best if that karma is then separated again in divorce. And so sometimes marriage can be until death like intended, but realistically, I don't think most people are meant to be together the rest of their lives. Most people are always growing and changing, and I feel there's been a big stigma in divorce that causes people to stay together even if they are being abused or unhappy. That is definitely shifting in the world. A major reason is that women didn't have much of a choice in the matter until recently. You know, marriage for a long time was about survival, and you didn't really have much of a choice in the matter. But now that women have more independence, it's like, okay, like people really weren't getting married for love. The majority of people were not. Like marriage was not about love. Like it'd be nice, but That's not what it was about. But I think it should be about love again. But I mean, I don't know. It depends on the person, really, because some people don't care about that. Some people just want money. Some people just want to be financially stable. And sometimes it goes both ways. And they're like, well, I just want a hot wife. And hot wife is like, well, I just want money. And they vibe. And that's okay. It's fine. To each his own. Marriage in the United States seems to be more about shared finances and not about loving a partner on a soul level. So if all you're concerned about is money, that could represent a closed off heart space, but it could also just be your personality. Like, people are so varied, and so it just depends. Some people are like less emotional, and that's just not as a part of their journey as much, or they're not as expressive with their emotions. And sometimes it just means emotions are not the main focus of their journey. I mean, we're all emotional beings on some level, but sometimes the focus on your life is more about working or money, you know? But a lot of people just suppress their feelings. So if you're in a mutual partnership that's healthy, even though you're not necessarily in love, I mean, that's fine if that's what you want. But if it's toxic and you hate each other, or it's unbalanced, or it's unpleasant most of the time, and solely for the financial side of things, that just doesn't seem very fulfilling to me on a soul level. I think it's important to be connected with who you really are, and that will tell you if the life you're living right now is in alignment with what's best for you. People will also stay in a karmic connection because they are still mirroring the problems that they need to heal or face. And if both are still on the same level, then they will still be together as the lesson has not ended. When one or both of them starts to realize and grow in another direction, then they will realize it's time to move on. But even with this realization that they need to move on, some people still may have a hard time doing so. These types of connections can sometimes expand over several lifetime incarnations until the lessons are learned. And generally, the final lesson is to let go, or if there's children or other shared resources involved, it's to find an equilibrium and more healthy ways to coexist with each other. Those karmic connections are like people that are married but they hate each other. And it's just so fascinating to me because there's so many people like that have been married and they really don't like each other. They hate each other, they fight, but they're still married and they wouldn't ever get divorced. And like, sometimes it's like, yeah, I'm not starting over, and it's just easier not to. And I don't know, I guess that's disconnected from the heart space, disconnected from what you truly want and desire, because it's easier not to be. That's a big problem a lot of people have, where they avoid their feelings. That's actually like a really big problem in the world, is we all are emotional beings, and then you know, learning to manage and control our feelings as the human race is that's the number one. Like, if we did that, we'd be great. Like, everyone just can't control their feelings, you know? They're letting their feelings rule them. That is causing all the problems. All of them. So that's all I have today. So thank you for watching. Bye bye.